Hello everyone, welcome to my African Music Conversations. I am Joe Kunnuji, and in this video I want to highlight the cultural diversity on the continent of Africa, which is reflected in the diversity of musical practices. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are a few things to note about Africa. There are over 3,000 people groups on the continent, and over 1,500 languages are spoken on the continent without considering the dialects of these languages. And each of these cultures or people groups have several genres of music. I'll give an instance. There are cases where a people group would have a pantheon of deities, numerous deities, and each of these deities require a different musical style for its worship, and that will invariably lead to several musical genres within one culture or one people group. Several other things that could be said about diversity in Africa, the languages, the people, the way Africans look. In fact, talking about Africa is talking about diversity. It is also important to note that in many African languages, the word music does not exist, or there are no terms that equate the Western conceptualization of music. That is to say, traditionally, music never existed by itself in many of these cultures, but musical activities existed within context of worship, rites of passage, play, context of lullabies, where mothers or older ones tried to make babies sleep. They would use songs, like while people worked on the farm, while people had games. So music never existed by itself. There were no concerts the way that we know them in the Western world. And that is why it's really important to be careful when we use the word music when referring to African traditions. And that's why I would rather say musical practices. These practices are musical, but they never existed the way that people would leave their homes and say, I am going to a concert. Traditionally, those kind of contexts never existed in various African cultures. Also, it's important to note that some of the styles that we refer to as traditional African styles have non-African influences. Remember that prior to the colonial era, people have been migrating, they have been trading across continents. And that is one of the reasons why Northern African music, for instance, has so much Arabic influence, and that is just one example. Examples like that abound all over Africa. You come to West Africa and you find influences of Northern African practices within what is known as their traditional music. This is to say that, as we all know, culture is not static, and the chances are some of the things that we consider modern and contemporary today, in some 100 years time, will become the traditional practices of where we live now, or of our cultures. So it's important to just put that out there, that some of those traditions may not necessarily originate from Africa. Some of them were borrowed, and some of them contain fusions of African practices with non-African practices. The point to be made here is that there is so much diversity on the continent that it becomes difficult to define what is really African. For instance, Northern African music, which I mentioned earlier on, is totally different from what you have in southern part of Africa. So when we use the term African music, what really are we referring to? It is such a vague term, and this is further highlighted by the fact that when people play music, they don't say that, okay, I want to play African music. People rather say, I want to play juju, I want to play kwaito. There are various musical styles on the continent, and people who play this music never really refer to them as African music, except within the global context. Maybe they are outside of their region, or they are outside of Africa, and They just want to play to the stereotype. There is a stereotype that Africans play certain kinds of music, and those are the contexts within which people will say, okay, I want to play African music. But locally, we never talk about African music. We talk about specific musical styles. Juju, Kwaito, like I said earlier on. The term African music is not only vague, but it's also a Western construct. It's a marketing category. It's an academic category. It's a category that just helps us define when we talk about things. This is the frame of reference. And we Africans have the work to educate the world on the diversity of the continent and what we have to contribute, even in this present modernist capitalist age. In that conversation of culture around the world, we have so much to contribute. So talking about what Africa has to contribute to the global music discourse, we can simply take a cue from some of the legends, some of the African greats, some of the pioneers of popular genres in Africa. The likes of Salif Keita of Fela Kuti, Tony Allen, Guy Warren of Ghana. Later on, he became Ghana Bar, and Siti Binti Sahad, Manu Dibango, Miriam Makeba, Hugh Masekela, Sonny Ade, and Thomas Mapfumo, E.T. Mensah, and several of them. One important thing that most of these greats did was to take African elements and fuse them with Western elements, and they created new genres. And Africa being so diverse, there are still so many things within Africa, so many styles, so many elements of music that are yet unexplored. And these are the things that we could be researching and fusing them with Western genres or Western styles could help us to birth newer genres and have fresh ideas to contribute to the global music discourse. Another group of people that have used ideas from Africa to make their music have both local and translocal appeal are African hip-hop musicians. Their use of local languages and talking about issues that are relevant to Africans are elements that they have used to make their music appealing both locally and outside. So there is so much that Africans can contribute when it comes to music to the global scene. And these are the things that I really want to advocate. I want to push. I want to encourage us to begin to look inwards. And in fact, beyond Africa, African elements has helped in the past to create newer genres. Cuban son in Cuba, bossa nova in Brazil, and American jazz. These are genres that benefited from African styles and African elements. And today in the now, Africa is not a people stuck in the past. We still have so much to contribute to the global scene. So while we continue to blend African elements with non-African ones, we could also indigenize some non-African genres, like the case of African hip-hop musicians, which I mentioned earlier on. The point is that we need to continue to create and bring about freshness. In my subsequent videos, I will be talking more specifically about individual African genres that are specific to a people group. And remember that I said earlier on that within a people group or within a culture, there are yet several genres, there are nuances of musical practices. So these are the kind of things I will be focusing on in each of the subsequent videos. And if you are new to this channel, kindly subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of those videos that I will be making subsequently. Bye for now.